Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. I never thought it would happen. A mixture of ambition, loneliness, and a moment of weakness led me down a path I never expected. One that would change my career, my relationship, and my sense of self. It all started at the company holiday party. I'd been working at my job for nearly 3 years. And although I had gained some recognition for my work, I wasn't where I thought I should be. I was a mid-level employee in a fast-paced marketing firm, constantly grinding to prove myself, hoping that anyone, would notice. I was determined, driven, and probably a bit too focused on climbing the corporate ladder. But I had my reasons years of watching others around me succeed, and the constant feeling of not being enough, not having enough. It made me hungry for success, validation, and recognition. Then there was Aaron, my boss. He was the owner of the company, charismatic, intelligent, and incredibly charming. He had a way of making everyone feel seen, heard, and important, especially those of us who worked directly under him. He had an aura of authority that could command a room, but also the warmth of someone who genuinely cared about his employees' well-being. As the weeks went on, I found myself looking forward to the meetings I had with him, the brief moments when our paths would cross in the office, the quick chats in the hallway. There was something magnetic about him, something that both intrigued and unnerved me. But I told myself I was just admiring him from a professional standpoint. He was a successful businessman, someone who had built a thriving company from the ground up. What could possibly go wrong? The holiday party was supposed to be an escape. From the usual grind, a time to relax and unwind with colleagues. Everyone had let their guards down, alcohol flowed freely, and the office that usually felt so structured and controlled became a blur of laughter and chatter. I remember walking into the ballroom, glancing around at the familiar faces of my coworkers, some in fancy dresses, others in sharp suits, all mingling and enjoying the evening. Aaron was there, of course, as the center of attention. He was telling a story to a group of colleagues, his eyes sparkling with passion. I watched him for a moment, his presence commanding the room, and I felt an inexplicable pull toward him. It wasn't just his success or confidence that attracted me. It was the way he made everyone feel important, like they were the only ones in the room. At some point, our eyes met across the room and he smiled at me. I froze. That smile was so full of warmth. Yet there was something else in it, something that made my heart race. It was subtle but unmistakable. Without thinking, I grabbed a drink from the bar and headed toward him. We exchanged small talk at first, the usual pleasantries, but soon the conversation shifted to something deeper. We talked about our careers, our ambitions, and as the alcohol continued to flow, we ended up talking about our personal lives. There was an undeniable chemistry between us, an energy that neither of us could ignore. I hadn't realized how much I'd been wanting something more, wanting someone to pay attention to me, to see me not just as an employee, but as a person with dreams, desires, and needs. At some point during the evening, Aaron asked if I wanted to step outside for some fresh air. I agreed, not thinking much of it. The crisp night air hit me as we stepped out onto the balcony. We stood there in silence for a while, looking out at the city lights. Then, suddenly, he turned toward me. "I've noticed you," he said, his voice low, almost intimate. "You've been working really hard, putting in the hours, always delivering results. You have so much potential, but there's more to you than what I see in the office. I'd like to know more about you." I felt a shiver run down my spine at his words. The way he looked at me made my heart race. And before I could even process what was happening, he leaned in, brushing his lips against mine in a kiss that was electric, unexpected, and yet in some twisted way, inevitable. My mind screamed at me to pull away, to stop it, to think about what I was doing. But the moment felt so charged, so intense that I didn't. We didn't go back inside right away. Instead, we found a quiet corner of the garden, away from the prying eyes of the office. I knew what was happening. I could feel the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a random kiss between two people. This was my boss, someone I respected, someone I had worked so hard to impress, someone with all the power in the office. It was a decision that could ruin everything. But in the heat of the moment, I didn't care. I told myself that it was just one mistake, a lapse in judgment. But deep down, I knew it was more. I wanted him. I wanted the attention, the validation. I wanted to feel like I mattered. And in that moment, with him, I felt like I was the most important person in the world. Our kiss deepened and things escalated quickly from there. We went back to his office, locked the door, and gave into the whirlwind of emotions that neither of us had prepared for. I don't remember much about what happened next, just the rush, the heat of the moment, the way his touch made me feel alive. But when it was over, I was left with a mix of emotions: guilt, shame, excitement, but also a sense of satisfaction. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I had crossed a line that I knew I shouldn't have, but the experience had awakened something inside me, something I couldn't ignore. The next day, I tried to act like nothing had happened. I avoided Aaron in the office, keeping my distance, pretending that the night before had been a mistake. But he didn't let me forget. He sought me out, spoke to me as if nothing had changed, and slowly things began to shift. He started complimenting my work more, praising my contributions, and before long, he began to include me in high-level meetings I'd never been invited to before. He began to see me differently, and I could feel it. I had his attention in a way that no one else in the office did. The promotion came a few weeks later. At first, I couldn't believe it. I had been doing well at my job, but so had many others in the company. Yet, Aaron chose me. He promoted me to a senior position with a significant salary increase and more responsibility. I was thrilled, but also terrified. I couldn't shake the feeling that my promotion wasn't entirely based on merit. Sure, I had worked hard, but the timing was suspicious. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if I had been promoted because of what had happened between Aaron and me. I tried to push the thought aside, convincing myself that I had earned it. After all, I was qualified for the role. But the whispers started. The office buzzed with rumors about my sudden promotion, and people began to talk. Some congratulated me, while others looked at me with suspicion. I tried to act professional, but inside I felt like a fraud. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was now living with the consequences of my actions. As the weeks went on, I tried to focus on my work, hoping that my success would speak for itself. But Aaron's attention became harder to ignore. He was constantly around, checking in on me, offering guidance, and sometimes just looking at me with that knowing smile. I started to feel like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between the professional success I'd achieved and the personal mistake I had made. The guilt never fully went away. I had slept with my boss. I had crossed a line that should never have been crossed, and now I had to live with the consequences of that decision. My promotion was a constant reminder of that night, of the choices I had made, and the power dynamics that had been altered in ways I couldn't reverse. Eventually, things began to shift again. Aaron and I continued our relationship, though it was never explicitly discussed. We kept it quiet, but the power imbalance was undeniable. I had the promotion, but at what cost? The line between ambition and infidelity had blurred, and I wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. I still don't know if I regret what happened. There are moments when I wonder if I could have gotten where I am now with that night, without giving in to the temptation, without crossing that boundary. But there are also moments when I feel like it was the catalyst for everything, the reason I'm where I am now. I've been promoted, but I can't help but feel that I'm still living with the consequences of that one night. The lines between professional success and personal morality are hard to navigate, and every day I wonder if I'll ever be able to escape the shadow of what I've done. And so I keep going, doing my best to prove I deserve this promotion, all the while knowing that it wasn't just hard work that got me here. It was a choice I made, a mistake that forever changed the course of my career, and maybe my life. As the months passed, the weight of what had transpired between Aaron and me continued to sit heavily on my shoulders. I had convinced myself that I was simply a product of ambition and circumstance, that what happened was a mistake, a fleeting moment of weakness. But deep down, I knew the truth was more complicated. I was constantly walking the fine line between professional success and personal guilt, constantly wondering if I was truly deserving of my promotion or if it was, in fact, the result of something far more insidious. Aaron's behavior didn't help ease my guilt. His actions were subtle but unmistakable. Whenever we were alone, he would smile in a way that felt like an unspoken acknowledgement of the night we shared. Sometimes he would make a comment about how well I was doing at my job, how proud he was of the progress I had made, but there was always that extra edge to it. That extra something in his tone that made it clear our personal connection was still there, simmering beneath the surface. He was proud of me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the pride wasn't just from my accomplishments. It was from the bond we had shared. One afternoon, as I was working late in my new office, I received a text from Aaron. It was simple, just how's everything going? But it immediately made my heart race. I tried to dismiss the flutter of excitement, but I couldn't ignore the feeling. I hadn't seen him in person for a few days due to the nature of our schedules, and I knew that seeing him again would bring back everything I had tried to suppress. We agreed to meet after work for a drink. I was nervous as I drove to the bar where we'd decided to meet. There was a knot in my stomach, partly because of how I still felt toward him, and partly because I knew I was about to make a choice again, one that could either solidify or shatter the delicate balance I'd been trying to maintain. I still couldn't tell if I wanted to escape this whole situation, or if I was simply addicted to power dynamics, to the rush of having his attention, his approval. When I arrived, Aaron was already seated at a corner table, looking every bit the successful, confident man he always did. But as soon as he saw me, the smile he gave me wasn't just professional, it was personal. The way he looked at me sent a ripple of tension through my body. There was an intimacy there, a shared history that no one else in the room would ever understand. I hesitated for a moment before sitting down, knowing full well that the conversation we were about to have would once again blur the lines between business and something far more personal. "How have you been?" he asked, his voice low like a familiar, comforting tone. But it felt different now, charged with something more. "I've been good," I replied, trying to keep my composure. "Busy. A lot has changed since everything. But I'm managing." He looked at me, his eyes intense, but not unkind. "I've been watching you, you're doing great. You've taken to this new role faster than anyone expected. But it's not just your work. There's something about you. You've always had that drive, that ambition." My heart thudded. It felt like a compliment, but also a reminder of how far things had gone. Was this just Aaron being Aaron, or was it something else? I wasn't sure anymore, but I knew it was a slippery slope. "You've made a big impact here," he continued, his voice dropping lower, almost intimate. "You've always stood out. You deserve all of this." I felt a rush of pride at his words, but there was an undertone of something else, something that felt like more than just professional praise. The tension between us was palpable, and I felt that familiar pull, that attraction. That had started everything. I could tell he felt it too. He was leaning in slightly, as if the space between us was too much. The conversation shifted again, this time turning to more personal matters, our families, our past relationships. It was like old times, only this time there was no denying. The tension, the lines between boss and employee had blurred to the point of irrelevance. I could feel his presence in every word he said, in every glance we exchanged as the evening wore on. It became more obvious that neither of us wanted to let go of the connection we shared. By the time we finished our drinks, the night had turned into something entirely different from what I had imagined. There was an undeniable chemistry between us, something that was becoming harder and harder to ignore. "Do you regret it?" Aaron asked, his voice almost a whisper as we stood up to leave. The question hung in the air between us, raw and vulnerable. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, but I also felt a strange sense of power. No, I said, surprising myself. I don't regret it. His eyes softened, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Neither do I. In that moment, I knew that whatever happened next would either bind us together or push us apart. The lines had already been crossed, and there was no going back. We walked out of the bar side by side, both knowing that the unspoken tension between us was far from overdought as the weeks went on. I continued to navigate my new role at the company, trying to keep my personal life and professional life separate. But the truth was, it wasn't as simple as that. Aaron's presence was constantly felt, whether in the office or in the moments when we would steal glances at each other across the room, or when we exchanged knowing looks during meetings. I could tell he was still invested in me, not just as an employee, but as something more. But despite the power dynamics, despite everything that had happened, I wasn't sure if I was willing to give up what I had worked so hard for. My promotion had come with more than just a new title. It had come with a new set of expectations, and I found myself questioning whether I had earned it. Yes, I had worked hard, but I had also crossed a line, and now I had to live with the consequences of that. The constant whispers around the office only fueled my inner turmoil. My colleagues looked at me differently, some with admiration, others with suspicion. I was now the woman who had not only slept with her boss, but had been rewarded for it. But in the quiet moments when I was alone, I couldn't help but ask myself, was I any better than the others? Had I really earned this promotion, or had it been handed to me because of my relationship with Aaron? I tried to bury those thoughts, focusing on my work, pushing the doubts aside. But there was always that nagging voice at the back of my mind, asking if I was truly deserving of everything I had achieved. It was a hard pill to swallow, knowing that the success I had always dreamed of might have come with a price I wasn't ready to fully acknowledge. The guilt was there, lurking in the shadows, but so was the power. I had climbed the ladder, had achieved what I wanted, and now I had to decide if I was going to let the past dictate my future, or if I would take control of my destiny. No matter how complicated or messy it might be. In the end, I couldn't escape the truth. I had slept with my boss, and in doing so, I had gained a promotion. But now, the real challenge was not the office politics or the rumors. It was coming to terms with the fact that my success, my career, and my identity were forever intertwined with a decision I couldn't undo. And as the days went on, I had to ask myself, was the promotion worth the price I had paid? The weeks turned into months, and as the days passed, the tension in the office continued to grow. At first, I thought I could keep everything under control juggling my role as a newly promoted senior employee and my secret relationship with Aaron, but the further I immersed myself in my responsibilities, the more difficult it became to keep things separate. The strain of living two lives, one as a professional at work and the other as someone tied to the head of the company, began to show. It didn't help that Aaron was, in many ways, still in control. He was my boss after all. He had the power to influence my career in ways I couldn't deny. He was the one who had promoted me, the one who could make or break my position. It was a power dynamic I couldn't escape, and I found myself constantly questioning whether I truly deserved to be where I was, or if my promotion was simply the result of something much more complicated. One day, as I walked into the office for a meeting with Aaron, I noticed a subtle shift. The staff was looking at me differently. Whispers that had once been quiet were now louder and more pronounced. I overheard snippets of conversations in the hall, comments about my promotion, comments about me and Aaron's closeness. It felt like everyone knew, even though nothing had been confirmed. The unspoken tension in the office became unbearable. It was as if I was being watched at all times. I knew that I had to be careful. I couldn't let the rumors take hold. I couldn't let the whispers become reality. But no matter how hard I tried to keep my focus on my work, the truth always lingered just beneath the surface. There was something between Aaron and me, something no one else could understand, and it was starting to affect everything. During one of our regular meetings, Aaron pulled me aside. We were in his office, just the two of us, and the air between us felt thick with unspoken words. I couldn't help but notice how he was looking at me, his gaze lingering longer than usual. His eyes were intense, but there was something else there too, a sense of power, but also a sense of something more. Something personal. "I think we need to talk," he said quietly, his voice low. "The office is starting to buzz, and I don't want it to get out of hand. We need to be cautious." I felt a rush of anxiety mixed with a strange sense of relief. I had been expecting this moment, knowing that eventually we would have to address the elephant in the room. But hearing him say it made everything feel so much more real. "How do we handle it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Aaron leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the desk. "We need to be discreet," he said, his tone businesslike. "I don't want anyone to think there's preferential treatment going on because of our relationship. Your promotion needs to be about your work, not anything else." I nodded, the weight of his words settling on my shoulders. It made sense, of course. We couldn't let anyone believe that I had been promoted because of anything other than my performance. But even as he said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. My work had been good, yes, but had it really been the deciding factor? Or had it been the other things, the nights we shared, the moments of intimacy that were completely separate from business? But I couldn't admit that. I couldn't let anyone, including myself, believe that my promotion had come with strings attached. So I swallowed my doubts and nodded again, this time with more confidence. "I understand," I said, my voice steady. "I'll keep my distance. We can focus on the work, and I'll make sure no one gets the wrong idea." But as I left Aaron's office that day, I felt like a part of me was being chipped away. The more I tried to convince myself that everything was professional, the more I realized that the lines had already been blurred beyond recognition. The power dynamic between us had shifted in ways I couldn't undo, and no matter how much I tried to separate my personal life from my work life, they were now forever intertwined. The days that followed were an exercise in restraint. I kept my head down at work, focused on my tasks, and tried to avoid too much interaction with Aaron, but it was impossible to ignore the tension that still existed between us. When our eyes met across the room, there was a spark that couldn't be extinguished. We tried to pretend that nothing had changed, but it was clear that everything had died as much as I tried to keep a professional distance. There were moments, fleeting moments, where Aaron's attention would fall back on me, and I couldn't help but respond. A brief touch on the arm during a meeting. A comment in passing that seemed more personal than professional. And each time, I would feel that familiar pull. The same magnetic attraction that had started everything in the first place. But it wasn't just the physical attraction that I struggled with. It was the emotional connection that seemed to be growing quietly and subtly beneath the surface. It was the late-night phone calls when Aaron would check in on me, not just about work, but about how I was doing personally. It was the quiet moments in the office when we'd share a laugh or a conversation that felt a little too intimate. The more time we spent together, the harder it became to separate the personal from the professional. One evening after another. Long day at the office, Aaron asked if I wanted to grab dinner. I hesitated, wondering if it was a good idea, but before I could say anything, he spoke again. "It's just dinner. We're colleagues after all. It'll be good to step away from the office for a bit." I agreed, but as we sat down at a quiet restaurant, the weight of everything between us hung in the air. We talked about work, of course, but there were also moments when the conversation drifted to more personal topics, family, life outside of the office. The more we talked, the more I realized how much I enjoyed his company. He wasn't just my boss. He was someone I'd come to care about in ways I hadn't anticipated, but the feeling of unease lingered. Every time he looked at me, I was reminded of how much had changed. We had crossed a line that I wasn't sure I could go back from. And as much as I tried to deny it, I knew that our relationship wasn't just a casual fling. It was something deeper, something more complicated. And it was beginning to affect everything: my career, my self-esteem, and my sense of who I was in the world. That night, as I drove home, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. I had achieved everything I had worked for. I had the promotion, the recognition, the respect of my peers. But all of it had come at a cost. I wasn't sure if I was still the person I had been when I first walked into this company. Had I changed? Too much? Was I still the woman who had worked so hard to get here? Or had I become someone entirely different, someone who had compromised her values for success? The next day at work, the tension was palpable. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, the whispers just beneath the surface. I knew they were all watching, wondering if my promotion had been earned, or if there was something else at play. The pressure was unbearable. I began to second-guess myself more and more, wondering if I was truly deserving of this success, or if I'd simply been swept up in the dynamics of a situation that was beyond my control. And then it happened. The tipping point. One morning, as I was sitting in my office, reviewing a report, Aaron came in unannounced. He closed the door behind him, and I felt a sense of unease wash over me. He walked over to my desk, leaning in slightly, and for a moment, everything else in the room faded away. "I need to know where we stand," he said, his voice low but firm. It's becoming more difficult to navigate, and I don't want it to ruin what we've worked for. We need to decide what this really is." I looked up at him, my heart pounding. The moment I had been dreading had finally arrived. There was no turning back now. The choice between professionalism and personal desire had come to a head. I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I had to decide what was truly important to me, my career, my integrity, and the boundaries I had once set for myself. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit to. Myself. I didn't just want the promotion. I didn't just want the success. I wanted him, Aaron, but I also realized that this relationship, no matter how much I wanted it, could never be separated from the consequences of my actions. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with choices that would require me to confront not just my feelings for Aaron, but the personal and professional consequences of the path I had chosen. Would I continue to sacrifice my values for success? Or would I stand up for myself, reclaim my self-respect, and leave this complicated relationship behind? Only time would tell.